My lover left me to die after a failed hit on the dawn. The wounded beast demanded my service and my soul. The acrid stench of cordite still burned in my nostrils, clinging to the opulent Persian rug beneath my knees, a grim counterpoint to the coppery tang of fresh blood. Screams had faded to pained moans, the staccato rhythm of automatic fire replaced by the drip, drip, drip of life escaping onto polished marble. My hands, trained to save, now trembled, slick with a warmth that wasn't my own. Just minutes ago, I'd been sharing a stolen glance with Marcus, our illicit rendezvous in the Don's lavish ballroom a perilous game. Then the world fractured. He'd kissed me, a hurried press of lips against mine, his eyes gleaming with a strange panicked urgency, before he vanished into the panicked crush of bodies. And then the explosion. The Don, a hulking figure of formidable reputation, lay bleeding, a grotesque centerpiece to the carnage. Marcus, my Marcus, had been part of it. The realization struck me harder than any physical blow. He'd orchestrated this and left me here, amidst the chaos, a loose end. A chill, sharper than any fear for my own life, pierced my core. A guttural sound ripped through the sudden quiet, drawing my gaze. He was alive. The Don, Enzo De Luca. Rumors spun tales of his cruelty, his absolute reign over the city's shadows, but no one spoke of his vulnerability. Now, a crimson stain bloomed across the crisp white of his dinner jacket, blossoming from his left flank. His eyes, the color of storm-swept ice, were open, locked onto mine. A silent command, pure and undiluted, passed between us. Panic clawed at my throat, but my surgeon's training, a rigorous discipline forged in the crucible of emergency rooms, asserted itself. My breath hitched, a traitorous protest, but my instincts, honed through countless life-or-death decisions, surged forward. Breathe, assess, act. My bag, a canvas extension of my own body, had been torn from my shoulder in the initial surge, but the small, sterile kit I always carried for minor emergencies, a habit ingrained from years of being on call, remained clutched in my fist. It was woefully inadequate for him, but it was all I had. Move. A deep voice, rough as granite, boomed from behind me. A burly man with a face like a hammered fist grabbed my arm, yanking me to my feet. My knees screamed in protest, but I kept my focus on De Luca. His gaze hadn't wavered. It was a physical tether, pulling me, demanding. "I'm a trauma surgeon," I stated, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my spine. The words felt like a pact with the devil. "He needs immediate care. Get him somewhere secure, quickly." The last word was less a plea, more an order. I was a surgeon. This was my domain, even in hell. The man grunted, momentarily stunned by my defiance, then barked orders to 2 others. They hoisted the Don's massive frame, his powerful limbs surprisingly limp, and began to drag him through a splintered doorway. I followed, my eyes scanning for any discarded medical tools, anything. My medical kit contained a sterile blade, sutures, a few vials of lidocaine, and gauze. Pathetic, given the probable depth of a gunshot wound. We navigated a labyrinth of shadowed corridors, the air growing heavier, colder, the sounds of the dying fading behind us. My mind raced, calculating, strategizing. Where did the bullet enter? Where did it exit? Is there internal bleeding? Every step was a battle between my professional obligation and the terror that threatened to engulf me. This man was a monster, yet I was bound by an oath to save him. Everything in me screamed to run, to flee this nightmare, but a smaller, insistent voice whispered of survival, of using my skill as a shield, a weapon. They brought him to a hidden room, surprisingly sterile for a crime lord's lair. A metal table dominated the center, gleaming under a harsh fluorescent light. Rows of instruments, inexplicably clean and organized, lined a trolley. It was as if a makeshift operating theater had been prepared, anticipating this very catastrophe. My eyebrows arched despite myself. He was always prepared. "Lay him flat," I commanded, my voice resonating with an authority I didn't truly possess. My fingers, steady now, flew to his pulse, a weak flutter beneath the skin of his wrist. His skin was pale, waxy. Shock was setting in. His men hovered, dark presences at the edges of the room, their weapons glinting in the stark light. Their eyes never left me. I was their only hope, and their potential sacrifice. The air vibrated with their unspoken threat. Fail, and you die. I tore away his blood-soaked jacket, then ripped his expensive shirt. The wound yawned, ugly and deep, just above his left hip. No exit wound. The bullet was still inside him. My stomach plummeted. This wasn't minor. This was major. I need proper instruments. Retractors, hemostats, suction, more sterile drapes, anesthesia, IV fluids. My words were clipped, rapid fire, a shield against the mounting pressure. The granite-faced man nodded, vanished, and returned with a swiftness that impressed me, carrying a large locked medical case. He didn't offer to open it. He simply set it on the adjacent table, his gaze challenging. "Open it," I instructed, my voice flat. My hands were already on DeLuca, feeling the tension in his abdomen, the grim heat radiating from the wound. He hesitated, then produced a small key, unlocking the case with a sharp click. Inside, arrayed with chilling precision, was an impressive hospital-grade surgical kit. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a contingency. This was a ready-made clinic for a man who expected to get shot. Ignoring the chill that feathered my skin, I plunged my hands into the work, retrieving what I needed. I cleansed the wound, my touch firm, methodical. DeLuca's body was a landscape of scars, old and brutal, telling a silent story of violence and survival. One particular jagged line ran from his collarbone to his bicep, a testament to another near-fatal encounter. "Lidocaine," I muttered, injecting the local anesthetic around the wound site. "He needs more than this, but it's all I have for pain right now." My gaze darted to his face. His eyes were still open, fixed on me, but they were glazed, pain carving harsh lines around their depths. A flicker, something akin to grudging respect, or perhaps just cold assessment, passed between us. I made the incision, extending the entry point to get a better view. The warm gush of blood was immediate, but I stemmed it with quick, practiced movements, my mind a tunnel, focused only on the task. Find the bullet. Stop the bleeding. Prevent sepsis. My hands moved with a furious precision, each action deliberate, learned over years of practice. I bypassed the hovering guards, the intimidating dawn, the memory of Marcus's betrayal. Here, in this sterile bubble, only the patient and the intricate dance of life and death existed. "Suction," I barked, not looking up. One of the men, surprisingly agile, moved forward with a portable suction unit. He was clumsy at first, but followed my terse commands. We worked in a bizarre, unsettling rhythm, a surgeon and a gangster, joined in a gruesome ballet. Minutes stretched into an eternity. I found the bullet, lodged against his kidney, a grotesque piece of metal. My forceps clamped around it, extracting it with a delicate precision. A collective sigh, hushed and reverent, rippled through the room from his men. The wound was deep, but thankfully, the kidney itself seemed intact, though bruised. I worked quickly, repairing damaged tissue, ligating small bleeders, my movements efficient, practiced. Sweat beaded on my forehead, tracing cold trails down my temples, but I ignored it. My focus remained absolute, a fierce protective shield around my concentration. Finally, after what felt like hours, I was done. Sutures, neat and tight, closed the incision. I packed the wound with sterile gauze, taping it securely. My body ached, a deep fatigue settling into my bones, but a strange surge of adrenaline still coursed through me. I had done it. I had saved him. I stepped back, my chest heaving, my gaze falling once more on the Don. His eyes, though still heavy-lidded with pain and the lingering effects of shock, held a new intensity. He watched me not with gratitude, but with an unsettling, possessive scrutiny. His breath, though shallow, was regular. "He'll live," I announced, my voice hoarse, "but he'll need round-the-clock monitoring. IV antibiotics, pain management, fluids, and absolute bed rest." The granite-faced man stepped forward. "You will provide it." His words were flat, devoid of negotiation. My heart lurched. I have a practice. I have patience. I have a life. The protest was weak, futile. My life, I realized, was already gone, shredded the moment Marcus had vanished, leaving me to face the Don's wrath. DeLuca, still pale, shifted his head slightly on the metal table, his gaze still holding mine. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips. "Your life, Dottore," he rasped, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the sterile air, "is now mine." He extended a hand, surprisingly strong despite his injuries, and gripped my wrist. His fingers, rough and calloused, tightened around my delicate bone. It wasn't a thank you. It was a brand, a claim. I stared at his face, at the cold, piercing depths of his eyes, and understood. The hit on the Don had failed. Marcus had abandoned me, and in saving this man, I had merely traded one cage for another. The room, once a sanctuary of my surgical prowess, transformed into my prison, and his grip, the ultimate lock. I was his now, and he would never let me go. His grip, hard as wrought iron, burned against my skin. The cold, piercing depths of his eyes held me transfixed, twin glaciers reflecting my own terror. The sterile air, once a sanctuary of professional focus, now felt thick with the scent of his blood and the suffocating weight of his claim. He hadn't asked. He had commanded, and I, in my desperate act of saving him, had unwittingly sealed my own fate. "Remove your hand," I uttered, the words surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my lungs. My pulse hammered against the confines of my wrist, a desperate drumbeat against his unyielding fingers. A flicker, a ghost of amusement, haunted the harsh lines around his mouth. "Are you ordering me, dottore?" His thumb, rough with old scars, brushed over the delicate skin of my inner wrist, sending a shiver, not of fear, but of something far more unsettling, through me. It was a possessive gesture, a deliberate violation of personal space. "I am asserting professional boundaries," I countered, my voice tight. Every instinct screamed to rip my hand free, to flee, but a perverse fascination rooted me to the spot. This man, so close to death moments ago, now exuded a coiled strength, a lethal magnetism that defied logic. My entire being recoiled, yet a morbid curiosity pulsed beneath the surface. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then returned to my eyes, holding mine. "Boundaries," he repeated, the word a soft rasp, laced with derision. "You walked into my world, dottore. There are no boundaries here, save those I dictate." He released my wrist, the sudden absence of his touch a cold shock, but his eyes never left me. They were anchors, holding me captive even without physical restraint. The granite-faced man stepped forward. "We have a room prepared for the dottoressa." His tone implied it was a privilege, not a cage. My gaze snapped to him, then back to DeLuca. "A room?" I echoed, the incredulity battling with a rising dread. "I need to go home. My patients will be waiting. My apartment, my life." The words sounded hollow, distant, even to my own ears. Marcus had shattered that life, reduced it to a bloody memory. DeLuca's breathing was still shallow, but his gaze, sharp as obsidian, missed nothing. "Your life, dottoressa," he murmured, "is intertwined with mine now, until I decide otherwise." A cough rattled his chest, a stark reminder of his precarious condition, yet his authority remained absolute. "Take her." The granite-faced man, whose name I still didn't know, gestured with a curt nod. Two other hulking figures, silent as shadows, positioned themselves on either side of me. I stood, my legs stiff from adrenaline, and followed, my mind a tempest of rage and disbelief. "This cannot be happening. I saved him. He owes me his life." But his world operated on a different currency, one where debts were paid in servitude, not gratitude. They led me away from the makeshift clinic, through more winding corridors, deeper into the mansion's unseen arteries. The opulent trappings of the ballroom, now surely a charnel house, felt a world away. This was the true heart of his empire, cold, silent, ruthless. The air grew warmer, infused with the scent of antique wood and something vaguely floral, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of the surgical suite. My feet, still in the heels I'd worn to the ball, a ridiculous detail amidst the carnage, ached with every step. My dress, once pristine, was now stained with blood and grime, a testament to the night's horrors. The men surrounding me were silent, their presence a palpable threat. I was not being escorted. I was being herded. They stopped before a heavy polished oak door, which one of them opened with a soft click. It led into a suite of rooms that stole my breath. This wasn't a cell. It was a gilded cage. A sprawling sitting room, furnished with plush velvet sofas and an antique writing desk, flowed into a spacious bedroom, dominated by a king-sized bed draped in silk. Beyond that, a marble bathroom gleamed under recessed lights. A large window, framed by heavy brocade curtains, offered a view of meticulously manicured gardens, serene and untouched by the chaos I'd just witnessed. "You will find everything you require here, Dottoressa," the granite-faced man stated, his voice devoid of warmth. "Fresh clothing, provisions. A full medical kit will be delivered shortly for the Don's ongoing care." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Do not attempt to leave. These windows are sealed, the doors are locked, and every corner of this estate is under surveillance." His words were a polite veneer over a brutal truth. My jaw clenched. "You expect me to just stay?" My voice was barely a whisper, ragged with the effort of holding back a scream. "You will tend to Don DeLuca," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Your service is required, and as the Don said, your life is now his." He nodded dismissively and turned, the heavy door closing behind him with a soft thud that echoed like a final verdict. The click of the lock, though muffled, vibrated through the floorboards and into my soul. Alone. Truly, terrifyingly alone. I sank onto the nearest velvet sofa, my legs giving out beneath me. My mind reeled. Marcus, the betrayal. The Don. The forced captivity. A sob clawed at my throat, but I swallowed it down. Tears were a luxury I couldn't afford. They would only blur my vision, dull my resolve. I had to think. I had to survive. Every fiber of my being screamed for escape, for retribution against Marcus, for the life that had been so cruelly snatched away. But a colder, more pragmatic voice, the one that had guided my hands through impossible surgeries, whispered, "Observe. Adapt. Wait." This was not a fight I could win with brute force. I was a surgeon, not a warrior. My weapon was my mind, my skill. I rose, restless energy coursing through me. I moved through the rooms, testing the window panes, solid, unyielding. I examined the doors, heavy and reinforced. No weaknesses, no hidden exits. He hadn't lied. I was thoroughly trapped. My gaze fell upon a small, exquisitely carved wooden box on the writing desk. Curiosity, a dangerous ally, pricked at me. I opened it. Inside, nestled on crimson silk, was a small, ornate key. A key to this room? My heart surged with a desperate, foolish hope. I snatched it, my fingers trembling, and rushed to the main door. The key slid into the lock, turned with a satisfying click. Hope blossomed, a fragile, intoxicating flower. I pushed the door open, a sliver of light from the corridor beckoning. Before I could take a step, a low growl, chillingly close, vibrated through the air. "I wouldn't advise that, Dottoressa." My blood ran cold. "DeLuca, he was here?" I spun around, the key clutched in my hand, my breath catching in my throat. He stood directly opposite my door, propped against the ornate railing of a sweeping staircase, a dark silhouette against the muted light of the corridor. His jacket was gone, his shirt replaced with a fresh, loose-fitting linen garment, but his side was still bandaged, the linen pulling taut over the fresh dressing. He looked pale, but undeniably formidable, his storm-swept eyes fixed on me. "You're supposed to be in bed," I stated, the words an automatic professional reprimand, even as fear coursed through me. His rapid recovery, his presence here, was a testament to his sheer will, a terrifying display of control. A faint smile devoid of warmth touched his lips. "And you, Dottoressa, are supposed to be tending to me, not attempting escape." He pushed off the railing, moving with a controlled grace that belied his injury. Each step sent a jolt of primal awareness through me. He was a predator closing in. "This is kidnapping," I declared, my voice gaining strength. "I have rights. I have a life." "Your rights ended when you stepped into my ballroom, Dottoressa," he countered, his voice a low rumble. "Your life became forfeit when Marcus Giordano left you to die amidst the smoke and blood." My breath hitched. Marcus. He knew. "What do you know about Marcus?" The name was a burning ember on my tongue. DeLuca stopped a few paces from me, his presence radiating a palpable heat. Everything, he stated simply. Marcus Giordano works for my rivals. He was a plant, and tonight, he pulled the trigger. His eyes, like chips of ice, held mine. He used you, Dottoressa, as a diversion, as a pawn, and he left you for dead. The words struck me, a brutal, undeniable truth. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Marcus's panicked kiss, his urgent departure, the calculated timing of the explosion. He hadn't been fleeing for his life. He'd been executing a plan, leaving me as collateral damage. The betrayal was deeper, more visceral than I had imagined. It wasn't just my heart he had broken. He had orchestrated my doom. My stomach churned with a nauseating mix of hurt and white-hot fury. He wouldn't, I whispered, the denial weak, pathetic. Even as I spoke, the image of his eyes, filled with a strange, cold urgency just before he vanished, solidified the truth. De Luca's expression remained unreadable, but a sliver of something, pity, understanding, flickered in his gaze. He did, and he did so much more. He designed this entire attack, knowing your presence, your unique skills, would ensure my survival. He calculated that I would keep you, and that one day, he would retrieve you, a valuable asset against me. The revelation sucker-punched me, stealing the air from my lungs. My lover had not only betrayed me, but had orchestrated my capture, turning my very expertise into a weapon for his manipulative game. I was not just a loose end. I was a carefully placed piece on a chessboard. The no but yes of my internal conflict twisted into something far more grotesque. I was simultaneously repulsed by this man, yet utterly dependent on him for protection against the very man I had once loved. My blood thrummed with a new kind of rage, cold and potent. He used you, De Luca reiterated, his voice softening, a stark contrast to his earlier harshness. He saw your value, your brilliance, and exploited it. He left you here, a sacrificial lamb, but also a tool he intends to reclaim. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me, and I, Dottoressa, have no intention of letting that happen. His words, meant to explain my captivity, were simultaneously a chilling declaration of ownership and a strange, distorted promise of protection. He was not holding me because I was a victim, but because he saw my strength, my potential. He was claiming me, so I'm your prisoner to keep me safe from— Your prisoner? I challenged, my voice laced with bitter sarcasm. You are my guest, he corrected, his eyes flashing. Under my protection. Outside these walls, Marcus will try to use you again, or worse. Other factions will hunt you, believing you complicit in the attack, a weakness to exploit. Here you are untouchable. Here, you are mine. The possessiveness in his tone was absolute, undeniable. My mind wrestled with his twisted logic. Every fiber screamed, no. This was not protection. This was enslavement. Yet, a traitorous part of me, wounded and raw from Marcus's betrayal, recognized the brutal honesty in his words. I was alone. I was vulnerable, and this man, this dangerous, powerful man, was offering a shield, even if that shield came with an unbreakable chain. I am a surgeon, I repeated, grasping at the last vestiges of my identity. I am not property. No, he agreed, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. You are not property. You are a resource, a priceless one, and I protect what is mine. He extended a hand, not to touch me, but to brush past me, retrieving the key from the lock. He held it up, its small, ornate form mocking my brief flicker of hope. This key is merely decorative, Dottoressa. The lock mechanism is internal, and it responds only to my voice. He turned the key in the lock, the soft click resonating with finality. Now come. He gestured down the corridor, towards the direction of the surgical suite. It's time for your next round of observations. Resentment flared, hot and volatile. He was injured. Yes. But he was already orchestrating my every move. The audacity was breathtaking. I've just performed complex surgery on you for hours. I need rest. I need to clean up. You will rest after my needs are met, he stated, his voice brooking no argument. The dawn does not wait. He turned and began to walk, his movements still stiff, but resolute. I stood there for a moment, torn. My exhaustion was immense, my body screaming for reprieve, but my professional oath, intertwined with my forced proximity, pulled me forward. He was my patient, and I was his prisoner. The two roles were now inextricably linked. Reluctantly, I followed him, my anger a cold knot in my stomach. He led me back to the sterile room, which now felt less like a clinic and more like an extension of his personal domain. He lay back on the metal table, wincing slightly as his wound stretched. His men, who had been hovering, retreated to the edges of the room, their dark gazes still on me. I moved with practiced efficiency, checking his vitals, changing his dressing, administering the antibiotics and pain medication. His skin was still cool, his pulse a little thready, but the fever had receded. My surgical work had been sound. The thought brought a grim satisfaction, a small victory in this crushing defeat. "You have skilled hands," he observed, his voice low as I worked. His eyes, still intense, followed my every movement. The compliment, stripped of any genuine warmth, felt like another brand of ownership. "They are trained hands," I corrected, not meeting his gaze. "Years of grueling practice. Thousands of hours in emergency rooms." "Good," he murmured. "They will serve me well," I finished, securing the fresh dressing. "You need to stay in bed. Any strenuous activity could cause internal bleeding or tear the sutures." My voice was crisp, professional, a shield against the unsettling intimacy of my task. He watched me, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his lips. "Perhaps," he said, the word drawn out, "you should stay closer then, to ensure I adhere to your instructions." My breath caught. The implication was clear. He wanted me to move into the medical suite, to be within arm's reach, a living extension of his recovery. The thought sent a jolt of both repulsion and a strange, reluctant fascination through me. Everything in me screamed to refuse, to demand my own space, my own privacy. But the image of Marcus, the true architect of my ruin, flickered in my mind. Here with DeLuca there was a terrible, undeniable safety, a whisper of acceptance in the midst of my defiance. "I have already assured your men I will monitor you round the clock," I stated, trying to maintain a professional distance. "From my room I can be here within moments." He merely raised an eyebrow, his gaze unflinching. "Unacceptable. You will be assigned quarters adjacent to this room. Your presence will be constant. Your vigilance, absolute." He made it sound like a privilege, an honor, not a sentence. The thought of sleeping so close to him, of being so intimately tied to his recovery, sent a wave of unease through me. But I knew better than to argue further. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a decree. He released me from his care for the night, and I was escorted back to my gilded cage. Exhaustion finally claimed me, and I sank into the plush bed, the silk sheets feeling strangely luxurious, almost mocking. My mind, however, refused to quiet. Marcus's betrayal, DeLuca's possessive claim, the chilling knowledge that I was a pawn in a much larger, deadlier game. Sleep offered no escape, only fragmented images of blood and betrayal. The next morning, after another round of forced observations on DeLuca, I returned to my room to find a new addition. On the antique writing desk, beside the purely ornamental key, lay a small, sleek tablet. It was thin, almost weightless, and clearly custom-made. Curiosity again trumped my caution. I picked it up. The screen glowed to life, displaying a single stark icon, a stylized D for DeLuca. There were no other apps, no internet browser, no games. Just that icon. I touched it. The screen shifted, revealing a single large image, a live feed. My breath hitched, a cold knot forming in my stomach. It was a camera view of my own room. The angle was high, encompassing the entire space. My bed, my sofa, my desk, every inch. The small, almost imperceptible lens of a camera, nestled in the corner of the ceiling, became clear in my mind's eye. Then, as I watched, the image on the tablet flickered. It switched to a different angle, revealing a corridor I recognized as leading from my suite to the main part of the mansion. Then another, a view of the gardens outside my window. A message appeared on the screen, overlaying the live feed, stark white text against the security footage. "These are your eyes, Dottoressa. My gift, to know where you are, to know where I am, to know where everyone is, for your protection, always." My fingers tightened around the tablet, the cold metal pressing into my palm. My own room, my supposed sanctuary. Every corner of my gilded cage was watched. Every moment, every breath recorded. The walls I had paced, the bed I had slept in, the air I had breathed, none of it was truly private. The cameras were everywhere, unseen, unheard, a constant invasive presence. My skin crawled with revulsion. He hadn't just claimed my service, he'd claimed my gaze, and with it, the terrifying absolute knowledge that in this house, there were no secrets from Enzo De Luca. The cold metal of the tablet pressed against my palm, a chilling testament to my complete lack of autonomy. My own room, the one space I had foolishly begun to consider a fragile sanctuary, was merely another stage for his unrelenting gaze. Revulsion crawled over my skin, raising gooseflesh along my arms. Every breath I'd taken, every restless movement in the silken sheets, had been an open performance for an unseen audience. He hadn't just claimed my service. He'd devoured my privacy, leaving me exposed and raw. A guttural sound, part growl, part sob, tried to escape, but I swallowed it, choking on the bitter tang of helplessness. My chest heaved, a frantic bird trapped behind ribs. Rage, white-hot and incandescent, flared through me, threatening to consume what little composure I had left. I wanted to smash the device, to rip the camera from the ceiling, to scream until my throat was hoarse. But years of surgical discipline, of operating under impossible pressure, had forged a different kind of survival instinct. Panic-blurred vision, dulled judgment, observation, assessment, action. Those were my weapons. My gaze snapped back to the tablet, its polished surface reflecting my own contorted expression. "These are your eyes, Dottoressa." His words echoed in the sudden, suffocating quiet. "My gift, to know where you are, to know where I am, to know where everyone is, for your protection. Always." A shiver, colder than any fear, traced its way down my spine. This wasn't protection. It was absolute control, masquerading as care. Yet a traitorous part of my mind, the clinical, analytical part, seized on the phrase, "to know where everyone is." If he monitored me, did he also monitor himself? His men? His entire estate? The thought was chilling, yet strangely compelling. This ubiquitous surveillance, meant to shackle me, might also be my window. My prison might contain the very tools for my potential liberation, or at the very least, my continued survival. Everything in me screamed against collaborating with my captor, against accepting any part of this grotesque reality. But a colder, more cunning voice whispered, "Use it. Turn his weapon against him. Learn." My fingers, surprisingly steady, began to explore the tablet. It was deceptively simple. Tapping the screen shifted through various camera feeds, the grand foyer, the sprawling gardens, the perimeter walls, the numerous corridors that snaked through the mansion. Each angle was pristine, the resolution unnervingly sharp. He had spared no expense in crafting his panopticon. I saw the granite-faced man, his name still unknown to me, patrolling a hallway. I saw other guards, their faces unreadable, their movements practiced. I saw the empty ballroom, now meticulously cleaned, a ghost of the carnage it had witnessed. Hours melted away as I sifted through the feeds, my exhaustion overridden by a fierce, driving compulsion. I watched the changing of the guard, the routes of the patrols, the blind spots, if any, of his meticulous system. My surgeon's mind, accustomed to dissecting complex problems, began to piece together a map of this fortress, both its strengths and its subtle weaknesses. The no raged, demanding freedom, demanding justice. But the yes was insidious, whispering that this was my only path forward. Understand the cage. Understand the beast. My forced daily routine began, a surreal dance of professional duty and suffocating captivity. Each morning, 2 of De Luca's silent men escorted me to the sterile medical suite. He lay on a specially adapted, reinforced bed now, his massive frame still powerful even in repose. The linen shirt was always fresh, but the bandages over his left hip were a stark reminder of the wound I'd closed. "Good morning, Dottoressa," he would say, his voice a low rasp, still edged with the lingering effects of his injury, but gaining strength each day. His eyes, those storm-swept glaciers, would watch my every movement, a possessive scrutiny that made my skin prickle. "Don De Luca," I'd respond, my voice crisp, professional, a shield. I would check his vitals, listen to his heart and lungs, palpate his abdomen with firm, assessing fingers. His skin was warm beneath my touch, his muscles taut even in relaxation. Each touch, purely medical, felt charged with an unsettling awareness, a silent acknowledgement of the life and death struggle we'd shared, and the new unspoken pact that bound us. "How is the wound healing?" he asked one afternoon, his voice softer than usual. He leaned back against the headboard, his gaze never leaving my face. The light from the window caught the hard planes of his jaw, the faint stubble, making him seem less like an untouchable crime lord and more like a formidable, dangerous man. "Remarkably well," I conceded, my voice flat. "Your constitution is robust." It was a grudging compliment, a testament to his sheer will. The infection markers were down, the tissue knitting cleanly. He was healing at an almost superhuman rate. A ghost of a smile, fleeting and dangerous, touched his lips. "You did good work, Dottoressa. You saved me." The words were devoid of gratitude, merely a statement of fact, another subtle reassertion of his ownership. "You saved me, therefore you are mine." I performed my duty, I countered, the retort automatic, protective. I pulled the fresh dressing from its sterile package. "Your obligation is to remain still." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated in the quiet room. "You are still ordering me even as you dress my wounds?" "I am advising my patient," I corrected, keeping my gaze fixed on the meticulous unfolding of the gauze. "My professional integrity demands it. And your integrity, Dottoressa," he mused, "is admirable. But you forget who holds the reins here." My breath hitched, the silent war within me raging. Everything in me screamed to lash out, to reject his condescension, his suffocating power. But the voice of survival, the traitorous whisper, reminded me of Marcus, of the world outside these walls, a world far more dangerous without DeLuca's reluctant protection. I needed to understand the reins, if I were ever to loosen them. Later that afternoon, back in my gilded cage, I resumed my obsessive surveillance. The tablet had become an extension of my hand, my mind. I began to notice patterns. A shift in the guard rotation, subtle, almost imperceptible, always happened after 2 a.m. A particular blind spot in the western wall, just behind a row of ancient cypress trees, remained unmonitored for nearly 10 minutes every 2 hours. A delivery truck, unmarked and always the same model, arrived precisely at 5 a.m. every other day, idling for an unusual length of time before proceeding to a service entrance. My surgeon's instinct for anomaly, for the detail that didn't fit, hummed to life. This wasn't just about my escape. This was about understanding the ecosystem of my prison, understanding the predator who held me. The no still roared, demanding freedom. The yes was becoming louder, demanding knowledge, demanding agency. Days bled into a week. DeLuca's recovery progressed with astonishing speed. He was out of bed, moving stiffly but purposefully, always accompanied by his silent guard. He still summoned me for checkups, for wound care, but the sessions grew shorter, more formal, yet somehow more charged. The unspoken tension between us was a living thing, breathing in the sterile air. Then I saw it. On the tablet, late one evening, a flicker in the feed from the western wall. Not a guard, not an animal. A deliberate, momentary interference, a digital ghost, followed by a slight alteration in the landscape. A newly disturbed patch of earth near the unmonitored cypress trees. Too subtle for an untrained eye. But my mind, trained to detect the smallest deviation from the norm, caught it. My heart hammered against my ribs. Someone was probing his defenses. Someone was testing the waters. And the security system he so proudly displayed, the gift he had given me, was not as absolute as he believed. The blind spot, coupled with the disturbance, spoke of reconnaissance. Everything in me screamed to keep silent, to let his enemies weaken him, to use the chaos for my escape. But the memory of Marcus's calculated betrayal, of being left as a pawn, burned fresh. If DeLuca fell, what would happen to me? His enemies would hardly be merciful. The no was powerful, wanting him gone. But the yes whispered, "He is your only shield for now." My survival was inextricably linked to his. I made my decision. A calculated risk, a power play. I found him in his study, a cavernous room of dark wood and leather, filled with the scent of old books and expensive cigars. He sat behind a massive desk, illuminated by a single lamp, a stark contrast to the opulence elsewhere. He was on a call, his voice low and dangerous, a predator's growl. He hung up, his eyes immediately locking onto me, sharp and assessing. "Dottoressa," he acknowledged, no warmth in his tone. "To what do I owe this unscheduled visit?" My pulse quickened, but my voice remained steady. "Don De Luca, I have an observation." I held up the tablet, the live feed of the western wall's blind spot on its screen. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his icy gaze. "My surveillance system is for your leisure, Dottoressa, not for your operational commentary." "Your operational commentary is flawed," I countered, stepping closer, placing the tablet on his desk. My finger tapped the screen, indicating the disturbed earth, the digital ghost of interference. "This area, the western wall, behind the cypress trees, there's a 10-minute window every 2 hours where it's unmonitored. Someone is exploiting it. Someone has been for days, probing your defenses." His expression remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed, focusing on the screen. The air in the room grew heavy, crackling with unspoken tension. His granite-faced enforcer, who had been standing silently by the door, shifted, his hand instinctively going to the weapon at his hip. "Explain," De Luca commanded, his voice devoid of emotion, yet radiating a latent threat. "The digital artifact. The disturbance in the soil. It's reconnaissance. They're observing the rotation, mapping the blind spots. They know your system is not airtight." I met his gaze, my own unwavering. "They're coming for you, Dawn, and they know where your weakness lies." A muscle jumped in his jaw. He picked up the tablet, his rough thumb brushing the screen, zooming in on the spot I'd indicated. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the ticking of an antique clock. His eyes, fixed on the screen, held a terrifying intensity. I had gambled. And now I waited for the axe to fall. He finally looked up, his gaze raking over me, no longer assessing, but something akin to respect. "Marcus Giordano's people," he stated. Not a question, but a cold, hard fact. Clever, to use the one flaw I hadn't yet accounted for in my digital net. He slammed the tablet back onto the desk, the sound echoing in the silent room. "You were meant to monitor my health, Dottoressa, not my defenses." "My survival, Don, is contingent on yours," I stated, my voice holding a defiant edge. "And my surgical training taught me to observe, to identify pathologies, to seek out the source of illness before it becomes fatal." My heart hammered, but I stood my ground. "This is a pathology in your system, and it is about to become fatal." He stared at me, his eyes piercing, trying to unravel the layers of my defiance and my desperate, calculating truth. "You just saved me, Dottoressa." He rose from his desk, moving with a controlled power that belied his healing wound. "Now you tell me I am still vulnerable." "You are a man," I said simply, "not a god, and even gods have weaknesses." The words were a gamble, a desperate plea for recognition, for an understanding that my value extended beyond my hands. He stopped directly in front of me, his immense presence overwhelming. "And what do you expect from this revelation?" His voice was a low growl, dangerous. "To be acknowledged," I said, my chin rising, "as more than just your healer, as an asset, as someone who saw what your highly trained men, what your infallible system, failed to see." It was everything in me screaming no to his control, but simultaneously a yes to playing his game, to carving out a space for myself within his terrifying world. A slow smile, predatory and chilling, stretched across his lips. "An asset. Yes, you are that, Dottoressa." He reached out, not to grab me, but to brush a stray strand of hair from my cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle, yet utterly possessive. "And because you are mine, and because you are clever, you have just bought yourself a deeper level of protection." His gaze darkened. "And a deeper level of responsibility." Before I could process his words, before I could recoil from his touch, a sudden, concussive boom ripped through the mansion, rattling the windows, throwing the entire structure into a violent tremor. The lights flickered, plunged into darkness, then surged back on, casting stark dancing shadows. A scream, shrill and terrified, tore through the sudden silence that followed. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice raw with shock. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. DeLuca's face, moments ago filled with a calculating calm, was now a mask of pure, lethal fury. "They're here," he snarled, his eyes blazing. "The western wall." He shoved the tablet into the hands of the granite-faced man. "Secure the perimeter! Find the breach!" But even as he barked orders, the building shuddered again, closer this time, accompanied by the splintering crash of glass. The sounds of breaking wood, shouts, and then the chilling, familiar rat-a-tat of automatic gunfire erupted from somewhere close. The attack was not just at the perimeter. It was inside. "Stay here," DeLuca commanded, his voice sharp as a blade. He pulled a concealed pistol from beneath his desk, his movements fluid, deadly. The transformation was complete. The patient was gone, replaced by the Dawn, the ruthless warlord. "No," I argued, my voice surprisingly strong despite the terror that gripped me. "You're still recovering. You're compromised." My surgeon's oath, my professional instinct surged above my fear. "You need me." He ignored me, already moving towards the study door. The granite-faced man, his face grim, blocked my path, a solid wall of muscle. "The Don's orders, Dottoressa." Another series of shots, closer still, tore through the mansion, followed by the sickening thud of bodies. The battle was escalating, spreading. I could hear shouts, the heavy thud of boots. Chaos erupts. The sounds were closer to us now, right outside the study. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, mirroring the cadence of the gunfire. Suddenly, the heavy oak door to the study splintered inward with a violent crash. 3 armed men, faces obscured by balaclavas, burst into the room, their automatic weapons spitting fire. DeLuca reacted with blinding speed, pulling me roughly behind him, his massive body a sudden unyielding shield. The bullets peppered the wall where I had stood moments before. He returned fire with a roar, the handgun in his grip a surprisingly loud cannon. One of the intruders crumpled, his weapon clattering to the floor. The other 2 fanned out, their eyes immediately locating DeLuca. "Get down," he bellowed, shoving me harder, forcing me to crouch behind the solid, antique desk. His body, already recovering, moved with astonishing agility, a dance of death. The air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire, the acrid smell of burning gunpowder, the whiz of bullets, and the frantic pounding of my own heart. He was fighting, a whirlwind of lethal precision, but one of the intruders, faster than the others, moved around his flank. I saw it, an instant before it happened. The glint of the knife, aimed not at his chest, but at his already wounded side. "Your side," I screamed, the warning tearing from my throat. DeLuca pivoted, firing a shot that grazed the man's arm, but not enough to stop the blade. The knife plunged. A grunt of pain escaped him, raw and visceral. His powerful frame shuddered, but he didn't fall. He retaliated with a brutal efficiency, dispatching the last 2 intruders with swift, deadly movements, their bodies collapsing to the floor with sickening finality. Silence, stark and ringing, descended on the room once more, broken only by DeLuca's ragged breathing and the distant shouts of his men. He stood over the bodies, his pistol still smoking, his gaze sweeping the room, assessing, calculating. He was bleeding again, a fresh crimson stain blooming across the pristine linen over his left hip, a darker, wider blotch than before. He turned to me, his face pale, streaked with sweat and grime, his eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and something else, a fierce, primal protectiveness. "Are you hurt?" His voice was hoarse, thick with effort. "No," I gasped, shaking my head, my hands pressed to my ears, trying to silence the echoes of the gunfire. "But you're bleeding. Badly," he didn't respond. He simply extended a hand, rough and blood-stained, towards me. "Get up." I hesitated, still trembling, but his gaze, intense and demanding, pulled me forward. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs unsteady. "Come," he commanded, his voice low, filled with an urgency that transcended their current safety. "They're still here. This room isn't secure enough." He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly firm despite his injury, and pulled me towards a hidden door behind a tapestry I hadn't noticed before. The touch, usually a brand of ownership, now felt like a desperate anchor, A lifeline. My every instinct screamed to recoil, to pull away from the bleeding, dangerous man. But the more dominant voice, raw with fear, whispered that he was my only chance. Everything in me screamed no, but some traitorous part of me whispered yes. We plunged into a hidden passage, dark and narrow, leaving the carnage of the study behind. His breathing was labored now, each step a struggle. He leaned heavily on me, his weight substantial. But I braced myself, my surgeon's mind already calculating the extent of his re-injury. The new wound was deeper, I suspected, than the original. We moved through a series of labyrinthine corridors, his pace slowing with each passing second, the sound of distant gunfire still echoing. He pushed open another hidden door, revealing a small, austere room. It looked like a panic room, designed for exactly this kind of scenario. A cot, a small medical kit, bottled water, nothing else. He collapsed onto the cot, groaning, his face ashen. He was losing blood, fast. "I need to see it," I commanded, my professional persona snapping into place. I tore open his fresh linen shirt, revealing the bloody mess. The original incision had torn, and the new stab wound was deep, dangerously close to his kidney. "Hold this," I instructed, pressing a clean cloth from the medical kit onto his wound. He grasped it with a white-knuckled grip, his eyes, though clouded with pain, still fixed on mine. "They won't stop," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "They'll find this room." Before I could respond, before I could even begin to assess the gravity of his new injury, the reinforced steel door to our hidden sanctuary shuddered violently. A muffled thud, then another, as if something heavy was being thrown against it. A high-pitched whine, then the metallic shriek of cutting metal. My eyes widened in horror. They had found us. They were cutting through the door. I was trapped, with a severely wounded man, and death was literally clawing its way through the steel. The sound grew louder, more insistent. The whine of the cutting tool now joined by a spark-spitting grind. My breath hitched. The blade was coming for me. The high-pitched whine grew louder, sharper, the metallic shriek of the cutting tool tearing through the reinforced steel. Sparks rained down, bright, angry stars against the gloom, illuminating the cold sweat beading onto Luca's ashen face. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against the confines of my ribs, keeping time with the terrifying grind. The blade was coming for us, a relentless, mechanical predator. "Hold it tighter," I commanded, my voice strained, pressing down on the makeshift compress. DeLuca gritted his teeth, his knuckles white against the blood-soaked fabric. The new stab wound was bleeding freely, his already pale skin turning an alarming shade of gray. He was weakening rapidly. The primal urge to flee warred with my surgeon's oath, the latter winning, fierce and unyielding. He was my patient, but more terrifyingly, my only shield. My eyes darted around the small, sterile panic room, austere, reinforced, but not impenetrable. The cot, the medical kit, the bottled water, that was it. No weapons, no escape route, or so it seemed. Observe, assess, act. The mantra from countless trauma bays echoed in my mind. The whine intensified, a section of the door beginning to glow with an ominous red heat. Smoke, acrid and metallic, curled into the tiny room. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the steel. "He's losing too much blood," I muttered, my gaze sweeping the small medical kit. Lidocaine, sutures, gauze. Not a combat arsenal. But a thought sparked, an insane, desperate idea. My fingers snatched the sterile scalpel, its blade gleaming under the flickering emergency light. It was barely 5 inches long, but razor sharp. My eyes fixed on DeLuca's face. "Listen," I said, my voice urgent, low. "You're compromised. You can't fight effectively like this." His eyes, clouded with pain, burned into mine, a silent challenge. "But I can buy us time, or inflict damage." He coughed, a ragged sound, pain twisting his features. "How, Dottoressa?" His voice was a raw whisper, laced with a terrifying curiosity. "The cutting tool," I explained, gesturing towards the door, the scalpel held tight in my trembling hand. "It's powered by a battery pack or a hose. Something. There's a weak point. And when they breach, they'll expect you. Not me, not this." I held up the scalpel, a pathetic weapon against an automatic rifle, but the intent was clear. A flash. Something akin to a predatory grin stretched his lips. Clever, Dottoressa. His gaze, though pained, held a dangerous spark. But they'll still have guns. We need a distraction, I pressed, my mind racing. A way to get them to lower their guard even for a second. The door is reinforced steel. It's vibrating. What about sound? DeLuca's eyes narrowed, a flicker of understanding passing between us. He slowly reached a hand under the cot, fumbling. My breath hitched. He wasn't just a target. He was a fortress with hidden defenses. He pulled out a small, palm-sized device, no bigger than a smartphone, made of dull metallic gray. There was a single large button. This is an acoustic disruptor, he rasped, his eyes fixed on the vibrating door. It emits a high-frequency pulse, designed to disorient and incapacitate without lethal force. For a few seconds, it will drop them. A few seconds is all I need, I affirmed, my grip tightening on the scalpel. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm, but a strange, cold calm settled over me. This was my operating room. This was a life-or-death decision. The metal shriek reached a crescendo. With a violent screech, a section of the door burst inward, showering sparks and debris. A gloved hand, holding the cutting torch, appeared first, followed by an arm, then a shoulder. They were creating a man-sized hole. Ready? DeLuca rasped, his eyes fierce. Ready, I breathed, positioning myself. As the first masked figure began to squeeze through the jagged opening, DeLuca slammed his thumb onto the disruptor. A piercing, agonizing shriek of sound erupted, a noise that felt less like hearing, and more like an assault directly on my brain. It vibrated through my bones, clawing at my eardrums, pure agony. I clapped my hands over my ears, grimacing, but forced my eyes open. The two men who had just breached the door crumpled, their weapons clattering to the floor, hands flying to their heads, faces contorted in agony. They thrashed, disoriented, momentarily blind. Now! DeLuca roared, his voice cutting through the excruciating sound, his hand still on the button. I launched forward, a blur of motion fueled by pure adrenaline. The scalpel, an extension of my enraged will, plunged into the thigh of the closest attacker, severing the fuel line of the cutting torch still clutched in his hand. A hiss of escaping gas, then a flash, a small contained explosion as the torch died, showering them with sparks and momentarily obscuring vision. Before the second man could recover, my scalpel slashed across his hand, the small blade catching a major tendon. He screamed, dropping his rifle. DeLuca, even compromised, was a force of nature. Still holding the disruptor, he used his free hand to grab the fallen rifle, swinging its butt with brutal force into the head of the nearest attacker, who crumpled senseless. The high-frequency shriek cut off as he released the button, leaving a ringing silence, punctuated by groans and ragged breathing. 3 more figures, drawn by the commotion, lunged through the jagged hole, their weapons raised. But DeLuca was ready. He moved with a speed that defied his injuries, firing the rifle with chilling precision. Shots exploded, deafening in the enclosed space. Bodies slammed against the steel walls, then dropped. The small room filled with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the coppery tang of fresh blood. I scrambled back, pressing myself against the wall, my scalpel still clutched in my hand, my breath tearing in and out of my lungs. DeLuca stood, a silhouette of vengeance, his chest heaving, his powerful frame now truly swaying. He had dispatched them, but at a terrible cost. The new wound was gushing, crimson rivers staining the floor around his feet. He staggered, dropping the rifle, his hand flying to his side, then collapsed onto the cot, groaning, his face contorted in agony. His eyes found mine, glazed, but still fiercely alive. "My side," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "It's ripped open." I was on him in an instant, my professional instincts seizing control. I tore away the blood-soaked linen, revealing the horrifying truth. The initial stab wound, which I had repaired, had reopened, and the force of the fighting, the sheer exertion, had caused internal bleeding to restart. My sutures had ripped. His kidney, bruised before, was now compromised. "You idiot!" I hissed, a wave of desperate fury washing over me, overriding fear. "You absolute arrogant idiot!" But even as I berated him, my hands were flying, tearing open the small medical kit, grabbing everything I needed. He was bleeding out, and there was nothing but me. "You need to be still," I ordered, my voice sharp, authoritative. Completely still. I rummaged through the kit, pulling out the largest gauge sutures, a fresh sterile blade, antiseptic. "This is going to hurt, a lot. I don't have enough lidocaine left, and I can't administer general anesthesia here." He nodded, his jaw clenched, his eyes never leaving mine. "Do what you must, dottoressa." His voice was a raw testament to his pain, but his will was unbroken. I worked with a furious, desperate precision. The scalpel extended the torn wound, giving me better access. The gush of blood was immediate, overwhelming, but I stemmed it with quick, practiced movements, my fingers finding the ruptured vessel, clamping it. My concentration was absolute, a fierce, protective shield against the chaos outside and the terrifying intimacy of the moment. I was knee-deep in his blood, my hands inside his body, fighting for his life, while outside, his enemies still prowled. Sweat poured down my face, stinging my eyes, but I ignored it. My vision was a tunnel, focused only on the intricate dance of life and death beneath my trembling fingers. I repaired the torn kidney capsule, ligated the bleeders, my fingers moving with a speed born of years of practice and the urgent press of survival. He groaned, a deep guttural sound as I threaded the needle, pulling the edges of the muscle and fascia together. His entire body trembled, but he held remarkably still, his gaze fixed on my face, a strange, burning intensity in his eyes. It was pure, unadulterated pain, yes, but also a profound, primal trust. The man who owned the city, who commanded armies, was utterly vulnerable beneath my hands, trusting me with his very existence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I was done. The sutures were neat, secure. I packed the wound, taping it tightly, my body aching with a bone-deep exhaustion. I sank back onto my heels, chest heaving, my hands slick with his blood. My entire being recoiled from the gruesome intimacy, yet a strange, almost manic exhilaration surged through me. I had saved him again. DeLuca lay still, his breath shallow, his eyes closed. For a terrifying moment I thought he was gone. Then, his eyelids fluttered open, his storm-swept gaze meeting mine. "You saved me," he rasped, the words a raw whisper. "I am a surgeon," I replied, my voice hoarse, devoid of emotion. A desperate attempt to create distance, to reclaim my professional self. "No," he contradicted, his voice gaining a fragile strength. "You are more. You fought, you bled, you saved me. And you did it not out of duty, but out of a different kind of alliance." His gaze held mine, intense, unwavering. "You are a warrior, dottoressa." The compliment, coming from this man, after what we had just endured, felt like a branding. Everything in me screamed to reject it, to deny any kinship with his brutal world, but the raw truth of his words resonated deep within me. I had fought. I had risked my life, not for him, not truly, but for my own survival, which was, inextricably, intertwined with his. The no raged, but the yes pulsed. A strange, dangerous recognition. He reached a hand, slow and deliberate, stained with his own blood, and cupped my cheek. His rough thumb brushed against my skin, sending a jolt through me. It was a possessive touch, yes, but also something else. Something I couldn't quite name. Raw, vulnerable, acknowledging. "They're still out there," I managed, my voice barely a whisper, trying to pull away from the overwhelming intimacy of his touch. The distant sounds of gunfire had receded, but they hadn't vanished. "Let them come," he murmured, his gaze never leaving mine, a fierce protectiveness radiating from him. "They won't find us. Not here." His fingers, surprisingly gentle, tangled in my hair, pulling me closer. His scent of blood and sweat and masculine power filled my senses, intoxicating and terrifying. My mind reeled. The adrenaline, the fear, the exhaustion, the raw proximity to death, it all converged. A swirling vortex of primal emotion. I had just risked my life for him again. He had shielded me with his body. We were survivors, bound by blood and chaos. Everything in me screamed no to this man, to his darkness, to his possessiveness. But the traitorous whisper, louder than ever, roared yes, acknowledging the undeniable pull, the desperate need for his unwavering protection, the fierce, unexpected connection that had forged itself in the crucible of violence. His lips found mine, bruised, demanding, tasting of blood and fear and an unspoken hunger. It was not a gentle kiss, but a primal claim, a desperate seeking. I gasped, a soft sound swallowed by his mouth, and then a moan, as a wave of untamed passion, born of terror and relief and an undeniable connection, surged through me. My hands, still trembling from the surgery, tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss. His hand left my cheek, trailing down my neck, over my shoulder, settling on the small of my back, pressing me against his wounded side. A jolt of pain, a stark reminder of his injury, ripped through him, but he barely flinched, his kiss growing more urgent, more fervent. My own body, battered and exhausted, responded with a fervor that shocked me. The touch, the taste, the smell of him. It was all consuming. We broke apart, both gasping, eyes wide and raw with unspoken emotion. His gaze was intense, possessive, yet also held a flicker of something profound, a silent question. My own breath hitched. The no had been silenced for now by the roaring yes. This wasn't love, not yet, but it was a bond, forged in fire and blood, a desperate, undeniable tether. My men will secure the perimeter, he finally managed, his voice still hoarse, but firmer. They'll find this room eventually, but we have time. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, searched mine. Time enough for this. His hand, still at my back, pulled me closer, until my body was pressed against his, hip to hip, breast to chest. The pain in his side was evident in his soft groan, but his resolve, his intent, was absolute. The urgency was intoxicating, born of the recent brush with death. We stripped each other slowly, clumsily, our hands fumbling with buttons and zippers, fueled by a raw, desperate need. His linen shirt, my blood-stained dress, fell to the floor in a heap. His body, scarred and powerful, was a testament to a life of violence, but beneath my touch, it was also vulnerable, achingly human. The fresh bandages over his wound felt strangely intimate against my bare skin. He laid me back on the cot, his weight pressing me into the flimsy mattress. His gaze never left mine, a silent conversation passing between us. Fear, defiance, hunger, a reluctant acceptance. His touch was rough, then tender, exploring every curve, every dip of my body, claiming me with a possessive urgency that both terrified and thrilled me. My body arched into his, a desperate seeking, a silent affirmation. When he finally entered me, it was not gentle, but a forceful, hungry claim. A gasp tore from my throat, but it was quickly replaced by a low moan as my body, raw and open, welcomed him. The rhythm was primal, urgent, a dance of two survivors, claiming solace and release in the face of death. Every thrust was a reaffirmation of life, of power, of their desperate connection. The world outside, with its gunfire and its terror, faded into a distant hum. Here, in this tiny, hidden room, only our bodies existed, locked in a ferocious, untamed intimacy. Afterward, we lay tangled on the cot, his heavy arm draped over me, his head buried in my hair, his breathing still ragged. The panic room, once a cold steel trap, now felt like a fragile temporary haven. His blood, my sweat, the metallic tang of gunpowder still in the air. It all mingled, a visceral testament to our shared ordeal. The sounds of distant gunfire finally died down. A muffled knock, then a shouted password, came from the other side of the reinforced door. DeLuca stirred, groaning softly, and his men began to cut through the breach from the outside. We cleaned ourselves as best we could with the bottled water, quickly dressing, the recent intimacy a raw, unspoken memory hanging between us. He was still weak, but his eyes, when they met mine, were clear, sharp, and possessive. The door finally opened, revealing the granite-faced man and a team of medics. Their faces, usually impassive, showed relief mixed with cold assessment when they saw us. They immediately began to tend to DeLuca's wounds. Later, in a clean, pristine room in a different part of the estate, away from the carnage, DeLuca finally called for me. He lay in a proper bed, attended by a small army of medical staff. But his gaze, when I entered, cut through them all, locking onto mine. He looked pale, but the fury was gone, replaced by a deep, unsettling calm. "The attack was repelled," he stated, his voice quiet, devoid of the previous day's urgency. Marcus Giordano's people were pushed back, many dead. My men secured the perimeter. I merely nodded, my gaze fixed on him, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. I waited. "You saved me, Dottoressa," he continued, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "Twice you fought for me, and you saw what my entire security detail missed." He paused, his eyes searching mine, seeking an answer to a question he hadn't yet asked. "You showed courage, ingenuity, and a willingness to fight, even when everything screamed for flight. Everything in me screamed no. No to his world, no to his dangerous life, no to the chains he offered, gilded or otherwise. But a treacherous part of me, wounded and raw, whispered yes. Yes to the fierce protection, yes to the undeniable connection forged in fire, yes to the challenge of standing beside, or perhaps even against, this powerful, enigmatic man. "You have a choice now, Dottoressa," he said, the words a shock, cutting through the silence. He raised a hand, making a dismissive gesture to his hovering men, who quickly melted away, leaving us alone. "My jet is prepared. My men will escort you with full protection to any city in the world. New identities, resources, a life free from my world, from Marcus, from any reprisal. You would be safe. You would be free." My breath hitched. Freedom. It was the word I had craved, the desire that had raged through my every fiber. But the thought of leaving, of simply walking away, now felt hollow. Marcus had poisoned that freedom, replacing it with the chilling reality of being a pawn, a target. And DeLuca, for all his dark power, had been my unexpected brutal shield. "Or," he continued, his voice deepening, his eyes holding mine with an unsettling intensity, "you can stay, not as a captive, not as a trophy, but as mine, my physician, yes, but also my confidant, my strategist, my partner, the woman who saw my weakness and chose to fight for me. You would be safe here, safer than anywhere, but your life would be intertwined with mine, with this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the immense mansion, the dark world it represented. A life of constant danger, yes, but also a life of absolute protection, of loyalty, of purpose. My mind spun, a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The fear, the anger at Marcus, the strange, undeniable pull towards this man. To walk away was to choose an empty freedom, a life of looking over my shoulder, a life without the unexpected challenge, the visceral connection. To stay was to embrace chaos, to step into a fire, but to do so with open eyes, and with a formidable protector at my back. I looked at him, truly looked at him, not as a captor, not as a patient, but as the man who had laid his life bare before me, who had offered a choice no one else ever would. He saw my strength, recognized my resilience, and in his own twisted way, honored it. This wasn't the sweet, conventional love story I might have once dreamed of. This was raw, dangerous, and utterly real. "I am a surgeon, Don DeLuca," I stated, my voice firm, clear. "My purpose is to heal, but my purpose is also to survive, and to fight for what I believe in." I took a step closer to his bed, my gaze never wavering. Marcus Giordano tried to use me. He thought he could break me, but he only showed me what I was truly capable of. His eyes, storm-swept and intense, held a question. "You didn't offer me freedom, Don," I clarified, my chin rising, a fierce resolve hardening my voice. "You offered me a choice, and I am not a woman who flees from a fight. Not anymore." I stepped to his bedside, reaching out a hand, not to touch his wound, but to cup his uninjured cheek, my touch firm, possessive, mirroring his own. "You need me, Enzo, and I will stay, not because I am forced, but because I choose you. And in doing so, I choose myself. I choose my place in your world, and I will make it mine." His eyes, dark and fathomless, flared with a terrifying satisfaction, a recognition. A faint, possessive smile touched his lips. He reached up, his large, scarred hand enveloping mine on his cheek, securing it there. His grip, even weakened, was a brand, a claim, not of a prisoner, but of a woman, finally taking her place.